One of the most frequent history-taking panic queries I receive from experienced international medical graduates preparing for OET speaking goes like this. When a patient drops a statement about being stressed or worried about work, I usually ignore it and ask my next medical checklist question because I am terrified of losing time. Am I losing marks for stepping over these comments? Holding this belief introduces an immediate high-risk liability under official marking criteria. Thousands of capable doctors treat OET history-taking as a rigid, one-way clinical interrogation. When a patient sighs and offers an emotional hint, candidate doctors panic, step over the statement, and plow ahead with diagnostic questions. You do not save time by ignoring patient hints. You trigger a time leak and compromise your consultation structure. Let us examine forensically why missing verbal cues damages your scorecard and how to execute your diagnostic phase with senior clinical authority. Now, why do highly articulate candidates consistently step over patient hints during history taking? It stems directly from what we define as the defensive medicine pitfall. In an acute hospital ward or a high-volume clinic, your medical license requires rapid data extraction. You are conditioned to focus exclusively on clinical red flags and physical symptoms. Under the psychological pressure of a timed examination, that defensive instinct hijacks your communication mechanics. When a patient says, "I'm just not sure how I'll manage at work," candidates panic, filter out the emotional context as conversational noise, and immediately ask, "And when did the headache start?" Look at the severe structural damage this habit inflicts upon your scorecard. First, you demonstrate an open-ended empathy trap by ignoring implicit patient distress. Second, you trigger an immediate scorecard penalty under patient's perspective by abandoning active listening in favor of administrative redundancy. Third, ignoring cues causes patient pushback later in stage 3, destroying your velocity control and causing timeline collapse. To eliminate this liability, you must understand how OET assessors actively evaluate your performance on test day. Under the official clinical communication criteria for patient's perspective, assessors explicitly mark whether you pick up and explore the patient's ideas, concerns, and expectations. Assessors are not grading how fast you complete a medical checklist. They are evaluating whether you demonstrate dynamic, patient-centered responsiveness. When a candidate ignores a verbal cue to ask a checklist question, the interlocutor is instructed to repeat or escalate their anxiety later in the role play. This immediately drops your marks across patient's perspective and relationship building. Conversely, an authoritative candidate who pauses, validates the cue, and integrates it into the diagnostic dialogue proves they can manage a complex consultation safely. Acknowledging a cue takes 5 seconds, but it protects your timeline runway and locks in your communication marks instantly. To address patient emotional hints without losing structural control of the consultation, you must replace conversational improvisation with a fixed operational framework. We call this the cue reflection protocol. This structured antidote operates across 3 deliberate clinical steps. Step 1 is acknowledge and reflect. You mirror the patient's exact emotional keyword to prove active listening without offering premature reassurance. Step 2 is validate impact. You explicitly link their emotional state to their physical symptoms, validating their concern as a legitimate clinical factor. Step 3 is the directed pivot. You launch a targeted diagnostic question that connects their distress directly back to your history-taking agenda. By executing this 3-step pipeline, you neutralize emotional friction instantly, protect your timeline runway, and maintain absolute structural leadership over stage 2 of the consultation. Here is the Masterclass standard script you deploy during history taking when a patient offers a verbal cue. Observe the strategic phrasing and cadence markers. "I hear that you're worried about work, Mr. Davis. Before we look at treatment options, tell me a bit more about how these symptoms are affecting your day-to-day routine." Examine the architectural precision of this exchange. By leading with, "I hear that you're worried," you immediately clear the patient's perspective criteria. By transitioning with, "Before we look at treatment options," you establish an explicit agenda boundary that keeps the patient calm and cooperative. You demonstrate profound clinical empathy while keeping your diagnostic phase moving predictably toward the 3-minute hard ceiling. Executing the script is only half the requirement. Your phonetic delivery determines whether you project clinical authority or internal panic. To master this protocol, you must enforce 3 specific vocal mechanics. First, the acoustic wall. The moment a patient delivers a verbal cue, enforce a full 1-second pause before speaking. Rushing to respond sounds dismissive and scripted. Silence acts as a reflective cushion that proves genuine clinical processing. Second, tempo de-escalation. Intentionally slow your talking speed by 10% when reflecting the patient's concern. An unhurried clinical delivery signals complete emotional control and reassures an anxious interlocutor. Third, the consultant drop. On the final syllable of your directed pivot, day-to-day routine, physically lower your chin slightly to force a downward pitch inflection. This downward intonation signals decisive clinical leadership, ensuring the interlocutor yields timeline control back to you seamlessly. Reflecting patient cues protects your marks under patient's perspective during history taking. However, you must view this skill within your macro timeline reality. Stage 2, targeted exclusion, must conclude by the 3-minute mark. If you step over patient cues because you are terrified of running out of time, the root cause is rarely the cues themselves, it is a time leak in stage 1. Spending 2 minutes on administrative redundancy leaves you scrambling during history taking. Mastering cue reflection keeps stage 2 tight, preventing emotional pushback and preserving a full 2-minute runway for stage 3, collaborative management. Now, I want to evaluate your current setup, and I mean that quite literally. Drop a comment below right now. Do you find yourself stepping over patient cues when nervous? Or where does your consultation timeline typically break down? Tell me your exact timing issues. I personally review and reply to your comments to help you troubleshoot your consultation setup. So drop your answer below and let's diagnose your timing together. Beyond our discussion in the comments, the most direct way to gain complete clarity on your exam readiness is to run a structural health check on your entire consultation. Rather than leaving your pacing to chance under exam pressure, you can evaluate your communication framework in under a minute. I've built a free 60-second timeline integrity audit specifically to help international medical graduates pinpoint their hidden structural leaks. By selecting the specific clinical habits and timing friction points you encounter in practice, this diagnostic tool evaluates your exact risk of test day timeline collapse. It gives you immediate, tailored phrasing protocols to lock in your consultation velocity long before you step into the exam room. Click the first link in the description below. Run your timeline integrity audit, and let's eliminate timeline collapse for good. I shall see you in the next masterclass.